Welcome to the Business Agility Boost of today. Our topic today is how to create alignment to business strategy and transparency of impact. We will explore this with the power of visual spaces to create a governance of trust. That means how to become transparent, respectful, create understanding, support, and togetherness. But why is that important? Our business landscape is evolving every day, and people seek for more meaning and want to contribute to a higher purpose. We are no longer able to find answers to all our bigger topics on our own. And to deal with these challenges, improve our collaboration, and become adaptive to change, most organizations start change initiatives, which are part of digital transformation or maybe sustainable transformation, a purpose transformation, and so on. But now, how to make transparent what you are working on? And how are all these initiatives connected to the bigger picture? In a way that people understand what they are contributing to and why that matters. My name is Elise Hofmeester, and it's my purpose to create spaces where everyone is able to thrive. And as founder of Twingster, we help the transformation and HR leadership team of Erste Group Bank to set up their One HR transformation. And we are about to find out their learnings and secrets to success. I'm very happy that today we have a special guest, Adriano Bruno. He is the former head of people and culture of Erste Group Bank, founder of Past Forward, and partner of Kennedy Fitch. He has an extensive experience across multiple industries and geographies. He is passionate about purpose, culture, and values. Advocate for humanizing the workplace. Welcome, Adriano. I'm very happy that you are here today.
Thank you, Elise, and welcome as well, and welcome to everyone listening and dialing in. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Good. And I still remember the first time that we met. It was during the COVID pandemic, so everything was online and it was a bit of a strange period for us all. I had a first session together with you and with your dear colleague, Margarita Yonova Popova. She was transformation lead at that time. And can you elaborate a bit more what the purpose of that session was?
Yes, sure. Thank you. So, when you mentioned it before, it was 2020. It was in the middle of pandemic, and the newly appointed CEO of Erste Group Bank hired me as his chief HR officer at the bank. And we were facing this pandemic. We had a very disruptive and volatile environment. I think we all faced that at that time. And in the middle of that, banks also had a very special role to play. As you can remember, they were systemic for the economy. And it was also a time when banks were regarded as the necessary evil, if you want. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when when I joined, we started to reflect with the CEO. How do we make sure that the bank like Erste stays actually relevant in the future? What does it take for the countries in which we operated? We were 7 countries there. Actually can be attractive to the clients of the future. How do we as an organization stay attractive to the talents of the future? What do we need to do to actually be relevant and stay relevant also in the future? So we had to reflect a little bit on that, because at that time, Erste Group was more of a group of banks, because every country, and this is critical for the understanding of this all, they were very autonomous, operating very individually, independently across all the group. So there were actually 7 banks, if you want, a group of banks rather than a banking group. And in this context, we and the CEO, we discussed to make a difference in the community and in the society and the bank. We want to have a new kind of approach and a different approach. We want to think, if we want to stay relevant, we need to go back and reflect on the purpose of this bank and make sure we translate the purpose, which is 200 years old already. What does that mean in the space of Europe in the year 2030, for instance? That's what we started to do. And we started to address this with the leaders of the organization. I'm sure we can come to that in a later stage, and
Mhm.
started a transformation journey based on rediscovering the purpose and designing a very attractive vision at that time.
Yeah.
This is the
And
context of our conversation. That's how we started.
yeah, and I can imagine that you also mentioned already the complexity of working with autonomous countries. So what did that mean also for you as an HR department?
Well, similar to the bank's CEOs and that leadership team,
Hmm.
most of the countries, the HR leaders in the countries, were actually focusing on their country agenda solely. There was not really a group agenda. There was no strategic people agenda or strategic plan for the whole organization. Every country operating very independently. Plus, this was the reality at that time. Every country was very operationally focused. So making sure the day-to-day realities, especially in the pandemic, were actually met and delivered. So very operational focus, very country limited focus, and no space, headspace, or even resources to think about the relevant future that we wanted to build. This was the reality also in HR. So, like my CEO at that time, who wanted to establish a broader leadership team to bring the whole group forward into the future, I face the same situation in HR. So we started to have a leadership journey in HR to build this group priorities for the people agenda.
Yeah, okay. And I can still remember that when we had that session, and we had more sessions before you started, you first also started working on the operating model. But what made you decide that you took a different approach?
Well, as I said, when I joined, I realized that there was a very limited collaboration across the HR organization. All in all, we were about 550 people in HR, but hardly the people outside the countries knew each other. It was very limited collaboration was there, very limited synergies, and yet we realized after a few conversations that everybody was facing similar problems, similar challenges. Suddenly we realized, hey, why do we actually face the problem 7 times and not once in the organization? Why should we not try to collaborate better and understand each other's needs and also capabilities in order to build synergies, in order to have more impact or better impact, faster impact even across the organization? So, this is what the reason was. This was the reason why I started to reflect together with Margarita. What would be a different operating model in HR? What would be a different way of collaborating seamlessly and leveraging and tapping into the capabilities of the whole organization? So we rethought the operating model, which is normally based on Ulrich, and we thought about how can we change the way we work if we start operating as one entity. That's why we called it One HR at that time.
Yeah, yeah, but I think that's also a good way to show that you really wanted to become one HR and
Indeed.
not all kind of different entities, because you wanted to work together to that higher purpose. Yeah. And can you elaborate a bit more on, because we will dive into, of course, how the Obeya works for you, in the way of aligning with each other. But before you started with working with this methodology, you had a different journey together with the HR leadership team. Can you elaborate a bit more on that, on how you came to your purpose, your strategy, and so on?
Yes. So indeed, way before we even considered Obeya, we wanted to, or I wanted to establish a new leadership team, a new leadership understanding. And I wanted to make sure that every country and their teams felt truly involved in this journey. So because group was not there as a thinking, as an element, as an entity, we pulled together the HR leaders of the countries and some other leadership members in the head office and started to discuss what could we be, who could we be, and what is the role of a group HR or HR in Erste? What do we want to deliver and what do we want to work on together? In other words, we reflected on what is our joint purpose for Erste Group in HR. We as a HR organization, what are we here to do? How do we want to do it? And how do we respond to the business need and the external challenges we mentioned before? So I pulled them together and started talking about who we want to be, actually who we want to become, more likely. And so the topics of operating model, the topics of Obeya, which were first front and center of my thinking, came more pushed in the back because first we needed to establish a real leadership team. And we started by talking about the purpose. We started talking about the strategic intent and capability we needed to build for this bank to be and stay relevant in the future as well. So first, leadership team building. That was the priority then.
Yeah, and what I also really liked about your approach and how you started together with the leadership team, I think it's very strong to do that, to really have the commitment together. And how do you want to role model also in your organization? Um, what I found very strong is that you really wanted to be ahead of the rest of the organization to understand what this entire change and transformation for the rest of the organization meant. You had in your mind to really be the orchestrator and accelerator of the transformation.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for mentioning that, because when I started to work with the CEOs of the organization to build this vision of the future for the bank, I realized that somebody will be asked to drive this change for the organization.
Mhm.
And in many organizations, HR is either in the driver's seat or plays a very, very important part of change and transformation. When I started to work with my HR colleagues, we realized that we really need to upskill ourselves. We really need to invest in our own understanding of how to lead and manage change, how to cultivate culture which fits the bank of the future. And for that, we needed to have a lot of dialogues. I can remember that we had a lot of dialogues planned for um, who we want to become, how we can get there, what is the perception we want to generate in the organization. We started to reflect about our strategic priorities for the organization. We started to embrace the fact that, hey, we want to create great employee experiences for the organization. So this is something we need to learn how to do. Again, upskilling and investing in ourselves. And we also wanted to make sure that we really start to collaborate in a much faster way and more clever way, so that the businesses can benefit from our solutions and products that we deliver in HR beyond the operational excellence we were already good at. So all of these realization came across about many, many dialogues, many, many sessions, both as teams, but you can imagine, but also personal level, because you need to build trust, you need to build a sense of belonging, a new identity, and this takes personal effort and team effort as well.
Yeah. So we can really say it's a journey
Oh,
to go through. Yeah, and
absolutely.
part of that journey, because you already mentioned a bit, you started to work with your team, gaining trust in the team, commitment in the team, understanding where you want to go to. But the moment you understand where you want to go to, you have a step to make from the position you are, where you are at this moment. How did that go? How did you approach that?
Well, this was probably the moment where I started to think about Obeya with the leadership team, really. This is because Obeya for me, and I knew Obeya from the past, from my past experiences, is a critical and essential model to keep ourselves true to the purpose that we want to be, making sure there's full transparency on the journey that we are on to get there. In other words, for me, Obeya was or is a sort of a compass to stay on the right path.
Mhm.
And therefore, we started to discuss and introduce the Obeya as a way of leading the organization towards that vision of the purpose that we had generated. So I started to use the Obeya, introduce Obeya as a way to get there.
Okay. And now, before we dive into the topic of the Obeya, because it was really helpful in your transformation, and I also see that in other companies. But maybe there are also people watching who do not really know what the Obeya looks like. So let's explain shortly. what the Obeya is. Well, the Obeya gained momentum when Toyota put Obeya into practice. That was in 1993, when they launched their first Prius as a part of the Toyota lean manufacturing system. And in less than 3 years, the first hybrid car, the Prius, was brought to market. So that is 15 years ahead of the competition. And that was really amazing back then. But the Obeya is literally, or maybe simply said, a large room. A room that has its roots found across continents, with many disciplines influencing each other throughout history. And there are many exchanges between Eastern and Western philosophies throughout history, which are the basic philosophy behind the Obeya. Because the Obeya is a room, but there is more underneath, the principles, the mindset which is necessary, and really the purpose of why using an Obeya can be very beneficial. You also see the improvement cycles in the Obeya, like the PDCA cycle. And in the past, both MIT and Harvard have been very influential to bring these practices available for the broader audience. But maybe most important is that it's really about connecting and collaborating into in the Obeya and bringing people in. So what we see is a room. So maybe we can do a kind of imaginary session and imagine that you step into a room where you see an entire overview, a mirror of your organization. And part of the room, one wall, is really about the purpose of your organization, the strategy, the values, the principles, the mission, and the vision of your organization. It's all visualized in there. Then the next wall is about the execution, because we have that strategy and that wonderful purpose, but how do you come to execute and deliver value to your customers and your employees? And how do you know that it is really aligned to that strategy? So that is also the power of working with this overview, that you have everything next to each other, and that you know, is this what we are working on really of value and related to our purpose? And how does it align with our values and our principles? Another wall, very important, is about the data. And here we make decisions about, hey, what does our data show? And how do we measure our performance? Are we really successful? Because we can work on certain things, but what does the data tell us? And another wall is about continuous improvement. So if we see, you already spoke, Adriano, about the employee experience, for instance, and so we also work with the customer experience. If we see that certain moments in those customer journeys and employee journeys drop down, that we see, we wanted to achieve an 8, but it is a 6. What can we do about it? Then we bring these topics to the improvement wall, and there we start to find out what the root cause is of the problem. But most important is, because an Obeya is a tool, but it is about connecting people to purpose. So bringing people in the room and have the conversations and the dialogue. And now this is your Obeya. So the Obeya where you worked in, but this is not how you started, because we started in a different way and online. Can you explain a bit more about that, Adriano?
Yeah, with pleasure. It's nice to see the pictures of the past again in that room. It brings back nice memories. So look, I mentioned before that we started on a leadership journey first, where we started to first did actually a SWOT analysis, if I remember correctly, to understand where are we coming from, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, what are our issues, and where do we want to tap into the opportunities. With that in mind, we started to discuss, okay, what would be the right purpose of the organization, as I mentioned before, And we had a lot of dialogues about that. And in the end, we settled on a nice purpose statement, but it's just a statement. So we needed to say, now what? Now, how do we tackle these things? So the next conversation we had is, what are the key strategic priorities we want to set to make this purpose come alive? I mentioned employee experience as one element. Another one was having roll out a large IT platform across the group, one platform and not seven, for
Mhm.
instance. These are all elements we started to put together strategic initiatives. And now, as you can imagine, in an ever-changing environment, in an ever, let's say, complex situation and ongoing discussions, it's easy to lose the overview and to lose the momentum as well. So that was the moment when we started to introduce Obeya as a tool. I don't want to call it tool, but it was a good
Yeah.
method to actually help us stay on course, as I said before. But because it was pandemic and because we started to work on 7 countries, we established a virtual Obeya place, an online tool. We use Miro for that to establish the various walls that you just explained, Elise. So, and you know what was funny? Without having to mention Obeya, the first thing we did is, okay, let's put down all we did: the SWOT analysis, the purpose statement, the strategic initiatives. And you know what happened? It was the first wall. And then introducing Obeya as kind of, okay, how can we move from this part of the conversation to actually executing the right thing and measuring success? It was then relatively easy to explain the concept of Obeya because it was next step of the journey. The more complicated thing was, of course, that you needed to do in a virtual environment, given the situation we were all facing. But it was a little bit more complex, but it worked. And I'm happy to say that it worked. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's also nice what you explain about just putting everything on the wall what you already worked on without mentioning that it could be or become a kind of obeya.
Indeed.
Maybe that also helps, not to make it too big and that people fear, oh, what are we going to do? And again, another tool. Yeah.
Yeah, that is very much the case. And you need to also reflect and consider the level of maturity that you have in a team. How much change can a team or even the organization absorb at any one time? And introducing a new concept which is not known with an unfamiliar name creates anxieties which are not necessary. So you need to balance these things and be quite flexible. And the nice thing about the way, I think we will come to that as well. We should discuss this. It's relatively flexible. It can absorb many, many current ways of working in the whole model without disrupting it too much. Yet, it has quite healthy discipline, I would say. Obeya comes with a healthy set of disciplines that if you apply them, then they will deliver value.
And can you elaborate a bit more about the disciplines? What do you mean with that?
Yeah, what I mean is the Obeya comes with a not prescribed, it's the wrong word, but with a set of um, already proven best practices, let's call it this way, which involve around next to the walls. It's a meeting rhythm. It's a kind of a governance around Obeya. So how often do you meet or should you meet discussing the strategic initiatives? How and when do you meet and with whom do you meet when you talk about the initiatives or do resource planning or measuring the impact? There are a set of meeting rhythms that Obeya is suggesting that you can apply. But again, here you need to be mindful and careful about how to introduce that. Because as you can imagine, everybody already has a set of meetings. The calendars are full all the time. Nobody has the time. And it's difficult then to introducing, we need to have a new set of meetings. And everybody throws up their hands and says, we have no time for this. This is actually what we faced. Yeah, so if you remember.
Yeah. I know, and I can also remember that we had really discussions also about some teams which were part of the group HR that worked, for instance, with OKRs and an OKR meeting rhythm,
Indeed.
and we really had a discussion. Okay, is this now on top of, or how did you approach that? What did you do?
So what we did there is to really take and the liberty and the time to understand what would be the ideal kind of meeting rhythm that Obeya suggests. and then try to understand what are we already doing today that we can integrate and actually use, continues to use, maybe with different focus or a different frequency, and what are things that we don't have today, which we need to add. And OKR is one of these elements which is not part of Obeya, because Obeya doesn't actually care what is the project methodology you use. You could use waterfall, you could use OKR, you can use anything that helps you deliver an initiative in a project. Obeya doesn't really care, and that's the beauty of it. So what we did is to say, if initiative A runs on OKR, fine, then you will have that type of rhythm that we include in the Obeya. And if you have a waterfall with maybe more lengthy time periods in between, you come to the Obeya when you're ready with that kind of phase in your waterfall. So we absorbed and integrated the current ways of working as much as possible into the Obeya structure, but without losing the kind of recommended and best practices that Obeya has. And it works. And that reassured people that they don't need to reinvent themselves or add inefficient new meetings on top.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very important thing to mention, that several ways of working are possible in the Obeya, so that it's not pre-scripted, and that you do not have to rigidly work only with OKRs, or and that you cannot work in a waterfall way or in another project methodology. Yeah. Do you then also say with this that because the Obeya is used a lot in organizations that start to work with an agile way of working, can you also use it without that?
Yes, I think, you mentioned yourself, Obeya has been in existence since 1993, where Agile was not on the radar for many people. So Obeya does work without Agile, works with Agile. In my personal view, Agile and Obeya is a natural fit. So it works really, really well in an Agile way of working. But it's by no all means necessary to be Agile at all. So I think Obeya is a standalone tool to help organizations stay on the path, have the full transparency. And as you said, it's very important, bring people together to make the right decisions with all stakeholders required in one room, if it's virtual or physical, and then move on, move forward. When we do that in a very nice rhythm, people get so used to it that people started to in the past, before we joined, they had spent a lot of time doing progress reports, PowerPoint presentation to know where we are, PowerPoint presentation to request a decision from somebody, maybe multiple times. It was going up and down the hierarchy of the organization. So the people working on a project had a lot of admin stuff that they were doing. And the nice thing about the approach of Obeya was that they realized, oh, we don't need to do extra reports. We don't need to do extra PowerPoints. We can actually put it on the wall of the Obeya. When the right meeting happens, then we can highlight the status. We can highlight the kind of barriers we face and the decision we would like to have. And it happens only one room in the same meeting. So it was, suddenly we were saving time. Suddenly we were not having unnecessary PowerPoints flying around the organization, but we all coalesced around this virtual Obeya room that we had at that time. And yes, it takes time, it takes effort to implement. I can only say, trust the process. Trust the process, because at one point, Obeya and the discipline will help you to navigate it much easier, and it will liberate some time.
Yeah. And Adriano, you had a large department with 700 people. So I can imagine that it's difficult to start with the entire department at once. So how did you start it? And was every project, did it also help for every project and project team you had in the organization?
Yeah, of course not. There was not like that. And what we started with is as I mentioned before, with strategic intent of how can we make sure that the newly named people and culture function that we have delivered the right value for the new vision of the bank. So if you want, it was a strategic intent with Obeya at the first. as a group HR leader, not never having had a group agenda in this organization, it was important to me to lead the organization with the right purpose, when the right initiatives, and be able to show to the rest of the organization, my board, where are we on this and why are we doing this. So for me, that was the initial trigger to have the Obeya, and it worked to a good extent. But to your point, not every initiative was in Obeya. It couldn't be because the organization was so big. And maybe I can think of two examples here, which where Obeya helped them with this. One, and I mentioned the project before, was this One HR IT platform that we wanted to implement. The project was called Emma, so it's easy to remember the Emma project. And as you can imagine, if you roll out one HR system across 45,000 people, you are facing issues. You're facing issues with priorities. You're facing issues with budget constraints. You're facing issues with resources, with priority setting. Every country has a different need, etc., etc. When we introduced Obeya at the top of the organization, the project team suddenly realized, hang on, maybe an Obeya approach could help us also in delivering our own, in itself, large project. So the project team took the Obeya approach, adapted it to their own specific project, which in that case was a waterfall project, an IT project, and started to unlock the barriers they had because suddenly they were collaborating much more closely. They had the eye on the really important priorities that they needed to solve, and they were able to communicate to us as leaders when they actually wanted to have a decision to be made. And suddenly, from a difficult environment, from a slow progress, it turned to be quite a smooth machine. And so Obeya had a really positive transformational impact on that project itself. So we have, the strategic Obeya, and we have the more operational Obeya for this large project. That is one example. Another example where we adapted this was the need for country organizations to display what are they working on day to day on an operational level. What are countries facing, which it was not visible on a strategic level because, as a matter of fact, it was operational. So the country head of HR said, we want to add this perspective on the Obeya as well. So we know how many resources we have available, what are we working on overall, and visualizing that with some effort, but we started to visualize that. We realized that we could make faster decisions regarding resource allocations. And this was also a positive surprise. We started to see when countries worked on similar projects, suddenly a natural collaboration started to happen because they said, why do we actually start working standalone? Why don't we work together? And the solutions were a bit easier to manage. So these two examples, an independent large project benefited from the Obeya discipline, and the full visualization from only a strategic intent to actually basically the full landscape of HR was visible in Obeya. And of course, it always is work in progress. You always need to work on it. You always need to adapt. You always need to listen. When do you take a little bit back from the change journey to make sure that people can absorb and work with it? When can you introduce new flexibility in it? So you really need to be on top of this as a leader yourself, and with the transformation that we have with Margarita. It's a huge effort. Her effort was tremendous in this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can also remember that working in this way, whether it is in your entire transformation journey or including these kind of methodologies, it takes time to adjust and to bring it further. What you already said, it's also a way of improving continuously along the way. Because there was a moment of time that the country lane was not there yet. So it was really what you already mentioned, really focused on the strategic topics, the strategic priorities. And then all of a sudden, the operational part came in.
Yes. And this was because the HR leaders at that time realized without that element, without the operational layer, we miss an element which is day-to-day reality. So we didn't want Obeya to become this, Cloud 7 kind of initiative. Everybody was happy, but the day-to-day reality looked very different. So we wanted to have the complete picture. But the nice thing about this, because it was a journey, it evolved from a coming together as a group of our organization into a new way of organizing and managing this journey towards, hey, can we use it even for more? So suddenly the change became a self-driven change by the people who were using it. It's also a catalyst for change. And I have to say that working with the Obeya environment improved the leadership team dynamic dramatically in a positive way. The trust was there. The kind of challenging each other was much more natural. Of course, it was constructive challenges. So I remember one statement that at the beginning of the journey they said, "Oh, it's always a nuisance to come together with these group topics. I have other things to do." Towards the end of this experience, people really enjoyed coming together. They were looking forward to come and meet, being virtual or physical, because we moved things forward, and of course, we enjoyed working together. And the background of Obeya was a really nice tool to help with this whole.
Yeah, yeah. I have, because I was part of it, I've seen it happen.
Yes.
But that was really the power, and also the power that you did not push, but really started to evolve and let it happen and let it emerge, so that it started to scale in itself a bit.
Yes.
For everyone who is listening, please, if you have questions, then put them in the comments and we can take them on along the way. So you do not have to wait till the end, but please, if there are questions, then let us know. We can elaborate on it. Adriano, we saw a picture of the physical Obeya.
Yes.
But that was really after, I think, a year of working in a virtual environment. So you really had a great Obeya online. And that was also a bit, of course, due to the COVID pandemic.
Of course.
But what made you decide that you wanted a physical Obeya?
Well, this is because I knew the Obeya from the past. I had my own experience. So when I first encountered Obeya, I was literally standing in a physical room. I was there visiting another company who had implemented this, and I spent no more than 30 minutes in that room, and I understood their strategic intent, their initiatives, who was working on it, and where the barriers are. And I was flabbergasted that in so little time, in one room, I understood what the organization was doing and why they were doing it. Can you imagine inviting anyone in your organization and have 30 minutes or less to explain who you are, what you're doing, and why you're doing it, and where the status is? I mean, for me, it was like I was hooked. Yeah? I was like, this is a great way and a very efficient way to actually align an organization from purpose strategy to down to execution. So my first experience was a physical experience of Obeya. And to your point, when we had this journey all virtual, what I was missing is this kind of experience, having leaders physically in one room, discussing with each other, explaining to each other what was happening. The project lead or the product owner in the room saying, hey, look, we're facing these barriers. Can you help us with that? These are the options. And actually physically doing the stuff in a very short time. So I wanted to recreate that. And then when the pandemic allowed us to do so, we built a physical Obeya room with all the information we had virtual. We put there on the wall. As you could remember on the screen, we had a large online screen for people who are not able to join. So we had kind of a hybrid meeting. It takes a bit more coordination, but it worked. And I was transformed back to the moment of saying this was a great experience. So, and the physical room, I can only recommend do it, and next to the virtual room, because it becomes tangible. It manifests the change that you actually are trying to do.
Yeah, and you got all kind of other departments also starting to get interested into what you were doing, because you made it very transparent.
Because we actually reserved a room for Obeya. So whenever we tried to book meeting rooms, as probably many of you have this realization, this room was always booked because it was always Obeya. So we reserved a room, and this fact plus the notion that some of the HR leaders and colleagues started to talk about Obeya, the way we meet with Obeya, the way we work with Obeya in the organization, the word started to spread, and people wanted to became curious. They wanted to know what's this? What is HR doing? So other department heads came and wanted to know more about Obeya. And so what could we do? Very simply invited them to the room. We explained to them why we work the way we work, the purpose, the strategy, and we had good business content conversation with like finance, or I think it was operations as well, in the room. And you can see all of them going, the light bulb going up and saying, oh, we could use this as well. This is very helpful. This is very nice to have this conversation. And the transparency gives such a different quality of conversation at the end. So that the physical room helped us to actually establish Obeya more as a innovative for the company at that time, innovative practice to lead strategic intent and organized work.
Yeah. And I think that's very powerful, that when other departments start to come to you and want to see, hey, what are you doing? You are doing something different than what we are doing. And
Yes.
probably it's a great way of working because you showed it and it was visible for everyone. Now we heard a lot of things what went very well. So the benefits and how it helped you to accelerate your transformation, but really also to become one team, one leadership team, one group team, one HR. But are there maybe also some examples of what you think, this is what we did not achieve yet, or what was really a failure, what did not work?
Yeah, I think there are a few things that I wouldn't call them failure, but we didn't have the maturity yet to get there. So one way which I would have liked to do is at the end is to use it also as a budgeting tool, financial budgeting tool. So where do you invest the money? How much money do you want to have from the organization? Where do you invest the limited resources you have? So I would love to have had the Obeya evolving into a rolling budget plan as well. Yeah? And we didn't achieve that yet because the countries being so autonomous and not being used to have a fund of budget, but everybody fighting for their own budget. We didn't achieve that level, and it was still, like fighting a silo budget versus having a holistic group-wide approach. So that was something that we didn't achieve. And similar with resource allocation, I mentioned that before. We tried to allocate resources, right people to the right project. That is a very nice promise that Obeya can enable as well. But we were limitedly successful in that. There was difficulties to have the full transparency who is working on what, because that creates, again, is an effort to actually show to the whole organization what you're working on. Mm-hmm. We didn't have time, we didn't have the right process in place to do that. When you have a one HR platform, maybe you can do that. If you have good people analytics, you can do that. And this was the biggest shortfall. We didn't utilize people analytics to the full extent yet, because the system was not in place fully absorbed, and we had data quality issues like many organizations face. But if you want to make data-driven decisions, which is one of the elements that you can also enable with Obeya, you need to have the right systems in place. You need to have the right data available to you. And we didn't get down that path so fast. So certain things which I wanted to and what we wanted to have at the end did not materialize as fast as we hoped so, or not at all.
Yeah. And but it's also good to mention that it is also part of the process. What I also see in other organizations, the struggle, but it's that is also a real dialogue and conversation to find out what data do we actually need.
Yeah,
and we have a lot of data in the organizations. But is everything also necessary to put on walls and to work with? That's also.
No, you're right. And sometimes there were moments where we went too far, because maybe I need to explain a bit more. When we had a rhythm of doing things, testing and experimenting a lot, and then trying to also do some retrospectives to understand and get some learning. Maybe we overdid it at one point with retrospectives. Yeah, we had a lot of discussion about what we could have done, we should have done, and we lost a little bit momentum. So we had to scale it down and not do as many retrospectives as we had planned to. And this is an example how you need to constantly adjust and align to the organization's needs. Yeah, basically.
Yeah,
And
and
I
I see.
think
Now, I'm not sure if it is a question, so I'm gonna read it. Diana Russo, welcome, Diana. Nice to meet you here and see you here again. Very nice to hear your story, Adriano. I have very similar experiences. Last company I supported to work with an HR Obeya, we started online because all major stakeholders thought that would be the best. But only once I built a physical one and people could indeed feel the room, things really kicked off. And the great side effect of the physical one, people who were not directly involved also got engaged and cross collaboration improved. Yeah, great, Diana, that you shared this with us, because that's also a bit what you experienced, Adriano.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks, Diane, as well to mention this. So it's exactly what we experienced. With hindsight, maybe what you could do is when you start on this Obeya and you feel there's some traction in your organization, even if it's virtual, still build a dummy physical room, because it's not about the content per se in that moment. It's more about the way you visualize transparently the idea of being fully aligned to the purpose. And I think you can make like a mock Obeya room, physical room, to actually trigger exactly what you just mentioned there, Diane, the collaboration, the kind of spirit that Obeya has. So, maybe that is a way to do it. Have a parallel physical session. Don't wait until it's nearly perfect. It's probably never nearly perfect anyway.
If we are perfect, then we are done, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
And in the world we are living in now, nothing is perfect, and it will every time evolve and change. But then it is very nice to have a kind of methodology that is a bit predictable. So your rhythms are predictable, the tooling is predictable, but what you put in it, that makes that it's adaptive to change, and how you work with it together in it.
Also, I'd like to add one element, because I don't want to give the wrong impression that only if it's physical then it works. No. I was very, very positively surprised how a virtual Obeya worked and delivered, even in a virtual setting, the benefits that Obeya has. So I'm a fan of physical room because of the manifestation of the change as well, and the kind of vision you can give to other people. But working with it, you can easily do it with a virtual setting, and it works marvelously well. I was really positively surprised.
Yeah, and especially when you work in different countries, so otherwise you need to come together again, and that's fine. But if you need to do that for every session, then probably that's not always possible. And
it reminds me of one thing, if I may add, because it was one of the difficulties I did not foresee, just because I wasn't thinking of it. It was the language issue. This was a strategic intent to start with, and then we started to add the operational country realities in there, as we discussed. Now, if you do that, and Obeya wants you to actually invite the people who are really owning the problem or looking for a solution or problem. So you don't always talk to the leaders where you maybe can assume that they are fluent and can express themselves in English. But hey, if you have payroll people sitting in Romania and they want your help and they're not able to express themselves, that's an issue. And we didn't see that coming too much, and we needed to find a way around that. So leaders really engaging in pre-sessions, etc., to make that happen. But if you want to truly collaborate on a larger scale, you need to take that into account. It's not self-explanatory that everybody speaks English.
Yeah, I think that's a good add to mention, especially in the case for different countries and different languages. Thank you, Adriano. And we have a question from Diana. Who, in your opinion, is the owner of the Obeya?
It's a good question. As you can see me thinking about that. I don't know. I think the the intent of having an Obeya should come from the leadership team. Yeah, so you should. I think somebody needs to drive it, to implement it. But once it's there, I think the owner comes from the people benefiting most, which, for instance, is by and large the product owners or the project teams who actually deliver the initiatives. They are the major beneficiaries of an Obeya if you've done it right. So de facto, they become the owners. And if done in a good rhythm, the Obeya becomes daily work, daily their reality. So it's like if you ask who owns team meetings, well, is it a team or is it the owner? You know? So I think you need an owner to kick it off, especially if it's a new topic in the organization. You need somebody to drive this change. But once it's actually started to be established and has a rhythm, I think the organization, if you can call it that, should take over the ownership.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not sustainable as well. Diane, I don't know, does that make sense?
I hope so. But I know that, for instance, at the beginning, the HR transformation team really took ownership to make it
Exactly.
work, the design, etc. And also make sure that certain topics, data were there. But in the Obeya, during the discussions and the dialogue about what should we work on, what is really what is of value to work on, there you also put owners on the several projects, and they came from and leadership team and from people in the organization. So thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
And we are almost, it's almost 2 o'clock, Adriano, and I think we can talk for hours, but we already, everyone who is watching, you already saw the banner that we created, the case study on the one side, the HR transformation journey, and especially a deep dive into the Obeya case. So if you want to read that, then please do. But before we go, I also want to show something else. But Adriano, one last question for you. If you would recommend something, so there is a company, for instance, and a group of leaders, but maybe just a department, a company, and they want to start with the Obeya, what would you recommend them to do?
Well, I think you should start with the end in mind. What I mean by that, you need to reflect upon what you want to achieve with your, let's say, function or organization. Then start to think what you want to stand for, i.e., the strategy or the purpose, if you want. Mm-hmm. And then connect these two via starting to build the walls of Obeya. We want to have a better employee experience and happy workforce, so to speak. And we do that because we are here as a HR function to make everybody become the best version of themselves. That was our mantra. So if you have that mantra and you want to achieve this outcome, how do you start building the necessary strategic capabilities and initiatives to do that? So start with the end in mind and start with the bigger picture first, and then go down step by step into the details. And at the end of the day, as I said it before, trust the process. Trust the process. Obeya can help you deliver many, many benefits. Be persistent. Also adjust and listen to the organization what is that they really need, and adjust for that. And then once it becomes a free flying wheel, self-autonomous kind of process, it will drive the process itself. You will see the benefit. And I can only say one thing. Once you use Obeya, you never want to miss it again.
Okay, that's very promising, Adriano. And for me personally, that's also the case. But so now in your new job and your new opportunities, you also will start to work with the Obeya probably.
Oh well, I don't want to miss it, and I will certainly apply many elements of Obeya there. And as my role as a partner of Kennedy Fitch and the consultants, I try to help companies to embrace it, help where I can to actually take this on and make it useful for them.
Yeah, good.
like you do.
Thank you, Adriano. And if you in the audience also want to discover this game change, sorry, need to do something. Yeah. Okay. Discover this game changer, then and connect the people to purpose in your organization, execute your strategy, and become data driven. Then we created a specific masterclass, Obeya Fundamentals. And we will deliver this on Wednesday, the 6th of December. We have today a special offer for this. What do you get? A proven leadership system, so certified Obeya Fundamentals Masterclass. It's 5 hours virtual interactive live session where we really deep dive into what is the Obeya and how can it work for you. And we have 1 week later a follow-up support session so that you can dive into it in that week together with maybe your team or in your organization. And if you have questions, then come back into the follow-up support session. There are some video tutorials which you can watch back and a community access where you can discuss what the Obeya brings and how it works for others in their teams or in their organization. Next to that, understanding of the principles of the Obeya, get started with practical instruments. What are the roles, the rhythm, collaboration? What can you do to implement? So what Adriano already said, start, for instance, with experimenting on certain topics and then scale it into the broader organization. You will also start with drafting a design of the Obeya for your organization, because we will dive into several Obeyas and there's not one the same. And maybe you start with one frame, but it will evolve along the way. And it's included with a certification by the Obeya Association, as we are partner of the Obeya Association. Wednesday, the 6th of December, normally it's €750 and for now 650. And if you want to follow this masterclass on the 6th of December, then sign up today via this QR code, and you can also go to our website www.twingster.com. Don't forget to fill in the Obeya, the promo code Obeya 2023. And I'm looking forward to see you. If you have questions, then please reach out to me. If you have questions to Adriano and you want to deep dive into what it, in certain aspects of the Obeya, then I'm pretty sure you can meet him and reach out to him via LinkedIn. Adriano, is that correct?
Of course, please do, anytime.
Okay, good. Then thank you, Adriano, for being here and taking the time to go through your learning journey, your journey of the HR transformation, and taking us with you in the Obeya and your personal journey and learnings. Thank you.
Alice, and it was a pleasure being here and sharing that journey, and looking forward to stay connected and discuss Obeya further. Take care.
Great. Thank you, Adriano. And thank you for being here. And in a month, we have a new Business Agility Boost live also on LinkedIn. And enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.